There's no freaking way this is going to work.
For us, it was a huge opportunity, even before the AI revolution, but much further after.
Basically, it's a field where you're either losing money or screwing your customers, right? It's like, and we love this with AI. Human intensive or just generally low margin businesses are a
Correct.
huge opportunity for AI disruption.
This is a really classic example of how you use AI to scale your business and increase your margins.
Yeah, welcome.
Hi, pleasure to
Great
be
to
here.
have you. Just because many people might not know what Daisy is, can you do the 30 seconds pitch of who's Daisy and what are you doing?
Of course. I'm Nir. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Daisy. Daisy is a property management company, tech-powered residential property management company. We were founded 5 years ago. We operate in New York City and the area. And we are basically reimagining how property management should be. And we'll talk about this in this chapter, how we use AI to do stuff, and really
It's,
exciting.
basically, it's a field where you're either losing money or screwing your customers, right? It's like, and we love this with AI. Human intensive or just generally low margin businesses are a
Correct.
huge opportunity for AI disruption, right? And just just so we have a sense of your scale, like how many separate agents do you have working in Daisy day in, day out in order to service your customers?
Human or AI agents?
No, AI agents.
Yeah, of course. So we have about 10 different categories of AI agents. Property management is a very wide business. It's not transactional. It's very wide. It's relationship based. And there are approximately 150 kinds of services. We have AI agents that capture certain domains, right? And can provide services within those areas. So it can be financials, maintenance, facilities, compliance, and so on.
In order to understand scale, right? So when you add a new building today, what's the human labor you need to add?
So the traditional property management industry, like you said, is very human intensive, low margin, low NPS kind of industry. For us, it was a huge opportunity, even before the AI revolution, but much further after. Specifically, onboarding new buildings is a very outdated process. It looks today like it was in 1990 approximately. Basically, a collection of a few hundreds to thousands documents, files, actual files, sometimes even paper files, but that you basically need to digest, right? So what we did at Daisy is we've built an AI agent that is capable of orchestrating this transition, as opposed to humans doing this collection, classification, and ingestion of data. Specifically, and maybe this will take us further down the conversation, but we actually have a full personality for this agent. We call him Steven. He's part of the team. He has roles, responsibilities. You can communicate with him over Slack. He has access to tools and data and so on. And this is a really classic example of how you use AI to scale your business and increase your margins.
So it's not just reducing costs, right? So how long would a switch of a business or a building take before, and how long does it take with Daisy? And what's the biggest impact if you look at the agentic tasks? Like
Of
what's
course.
most impactful there?
The switch takes between 30 and 60 days, and it is dependent because it's a transfer process. It is dependent on the previous management company, which also has humans, and they actually have only humans, right? So you're basically dependent on them. When we introduced Steven, we basically were able not necessarily to shorten this period because it is dependent on the other party, which are human, but we could have basically do more at the same time, right? We could parallelize this operation. We could increase our ability to grow faster. And we could repurpose the team that was previously doing that to do more kind of like other types of work at the organization. So that was the immediate benefit.
So something that is not spoken about much, right? Because most people, many entrepreneurs don't realize where does AI stop or what capabilities it has today. And we'll talk later about this. But the interesting thing here is that some of the better deployment models actually put humans in the loop, meaning that
Correct.
it's not just putting the agent, just praying that works with the user. It's how you get feedback from a human and constantly improve. So have a flywheel of learning. Like, how does that work in Daisy?
The way it works is as follows. First, when you build this kind of like agentic workflow with humans in the loop, you have a few options. So when you want to place humans, one option is actually to put them on the front, right? And a classic example of that is where your customer expects a certain relationship, right? So you actually still keep the human touch. This is could be for branding reasons, for positioning reasons, for relationship reasons, and this is one really good place to put humans in service companies like Daisy. Whereas the human is really serving as kind of like a trusted advisor, but the AI is behind him or her doing all the heavy lifting. This is a really interesting positioning for a human, right? So they're basically not doing the work, but they're presenting, explaining, and communicating with the customer. Another position that you can put humans in is the classic domain in the loop, either for evaluation or for online accuracy, right? Let's start with online accuracy. In the case of Steven, we have humans in the loop for making sure that the classification of financial documents, which are a bit more sensitive, and we have like kind of like a double verification, right? So you have the classification of the files, and then you have another layer of humans. So this is kind of like just to make sure that from an online workflow perspective, you still maintain high quality. And in some cases, this is actually beneficial because you kind of like want to optimize for accuracy over latency or right resolve time. The most interesting strategic placement for humans is what we call evals, right? Evaluation framework, where you basically build an infrastructure that helps you train benchmarks and data sets for leveraging AI in a better way, right? So you have humans basically making sure that the prompt is doing what they're supposed to do.
Just to make sense of it. So by making it an intentional design and not kind of an afterthought because AI is not good enough, but actually saying who is more appropriate to work with the user, where do I need more data, how do I tag that, and how do I operationalize it? So if I'm intentional about it, it actually creates a system that is not just an AI or an improvement on top of AI. It's actually getting the right entity at the right time with the right person. It opens up an interesting question, like, when you think about internal versus external agents, right? So, and, single turn versus multi-turn, like, how are you thinking about this? If you look at those 10 agents, how many of them are providing internal service versus external service?
When you are basically building AI capabilities in your organization, kind of like I'm trying to generalize it for the audience, starting with internal is just safer, right? You get like, if there are errors, you get like faster feedback loops. You can kind of like train, you can build trust internally with AI. And this is critical. You actually want to build trust internally with AI before you do it externally. When you have operational customer support teams, sales teams, marketing teams, yeah, they need to trust that it's doing what it needs to do. This is just like a change management culture tip advice that I can provide. We actually have many customer facing AI, but I think you've mentioned it like one pass or zero shot or one shot, where basically you have a transaction and you have an LLM doing something in the transaction. Could be evaluation of documents, could be phrasing of communication, right? It could be generation of data, and we have many such like that, like customers are almost kind of like used to that. It makes much sense. You can have like, our AI did this, decided that. It works, and there's very little friction. Whereas actually the full agentic behavior, which in my experience, this is a completely different technology, where you have something that's full agentic. And Stephen, for example, is full agentic, and Stephen communicates externally with the previous management company. Uh, you this is cutting edge, right? And this is where you actually need to be more cautious. And I would advise to start internally with those and then move externally as you feel more confident and you have the evaluation framework in place.
So you started Daisy before the LLMs, before the I think before even GPT-3. So at
Correct.
that time, you start with a Model T approach, right? It's like breaking down every process, every step to make it repeatable, much like car production or being able to reduce costs through leveraging less professional, either
Correct.
people or systems. So it's a like, I would look at this as a prerequisite to get AI right, but a different perspective can be, it's great for repeatability, but agents actually are not repeatable. Like, they are somewhat random. They take autonomy. So how's the tension like between those two systems, and how do you transition uh, from something that is geared for scale and repeatability towards agentic that is more open ended, and how do you leverage both?
Great question. And you're absolutely correct. When we founded Daisy before the AI revolution, we had the same vision and the same hypothesis that we have now, which is that property management is disruptable and you can scale it with technology. Uh, Nothing changed there. But our approach before the AI revolution was to basically take those 150, 200 kinds of transaction and basically build a very rigor and strict workflow that kind of like runs this end to end, right? So we used to say that if in a traditional management company you have this wall with manuals on the wall, you basically pull this and you say, okay, how do I evict someone? How do I do a lease? How do I do this violation? Then at Daisy, this book of knowledge is in our code. And we actually use the very powerful code-based workflow engine called Temporal, which is very strict, very rigorous, and we still have it and still use it. But this is a fundamentally different approach on how do you tackle a core service, how do you tackle a transaction. Um, when the generative AI revolution started, we actually started experimenting with something that's much more fluid and flexible than those strict code-based workflows, where you basically have general guidance to an agent on how to solve something, and then you have far less control. And I think that what I described now is those two extremes, and I'll be happy to share maybe a bit about how we kind of like balance those and what we learned. Uh, where do you want me to dive
So
to click into?
I definitely we should drill into that. I think that most people actually take those two extremes versus see how they can work together. So how can you create the scaffolding, or kind of the still use the process oriented steps in order to make sure that you, in a transition, you make sure you get all the information from your customer, or even direct them appropriately. So that's very much of a checklist oriented approach, while an agent might miss a step or hallucinate. So actually leveraging both together, I think, is a huge opportunity that people just don't think about enough.
The way that I would describe it is there's a common kind of like software architecture pattern of choreography versus orchestration, right? And we are in the world of orchestration, right? Choreography is basically when you kind of like let events run in the system and kind of like locally decide what to do next. And the other approach is orchestration. And I think that orchestration is a guiding principle both for workflows and for agents. The way that I think about this is the following. If you have some sort of a business transaction or process that you want to automate, the first thing you need to do anyway is to do this process mining, right? Understanding how you want this to be achieved. And this is generally true. And once you have that in mind, again, as I said before, if you are too strict with workflows, then it's really hard to operate, whether it's internally or externally. Like you can't, it's like a track, a rail that you can't escape from. And this is in reality sometimes creates problems, right? Sometimes you need this flexibility. Whereas with agents, it's if it's too flexible, then you can also run into problems. I'll give an example. At Daisy, we want to kind of like react to tickets, right? You can think of requests, right, as tickets, and you want to kind of like process them, right? So when you think about that, you need to do a few things, right? You need to first identify the user, right? Who am I speaking with? It could be a resident, an owner, a renter, broker, a vendor, right? And every business, every industry has their own complexity on who's interacting with us. Then you need to understand things like, yep, where do you live? Like, which property are we talking about? And then you go into, okay, what's the intent? What are you trying to do? What do you need, right? And when we try to do this, what I said, in a full agentic way, it was just like really hard to force the agent to do these steps like 1, 2, 3, right? Like I said now. You actually want to force you want to orchestrate it. And we saw that our agent kind of like jumped between stuff, like he understood the intent, but didn't understand who is he speaking with, right? So, like you can't solve it with prompt engineering. You just like can't. You can't like force it. And what we did is we actually, if I'm going back to the two extremes, we actually took full agents and we dialed them back a bit into a network, a graph of agents that is actually orchestrated from the top, right? So we say, so now we have a workflow, or we have some sort of an orchestration framework, which is code-based, and we now say, this is a tiny agent that's doing just this, and now you do this, but you do it in a full agentic way, and so forth, right?
That's super interesting. So and I think we both agree that at the asymptote, AI should be able to do what you're talking about. But right now we're in kind of the scaffolding era. You can take the existing technologies and you can force them or help them go towards the functionality that you need. And at some point, we can just remove that scaffolding and have it work with just a classical LLM. But we don't know when that actually happens. And it brings us back to evals, right? It's like, in my mind, having an eval database that says, hey, we try to do this thing. So we try to have that agent go through the process, but it didn't work because it was either too random or it didn't work or I couldn't understand exactly the situation, didn't have contextual data, whatever. If you have a database of those failure modes, it can be a true asset of your company because it allows you to move faster. So as soon as something is resolved, you can take advantage of the new technology or a different model. How are you thinking about this? How are you thinking about building the eval database of Daisy?
I'll try not to be too philosophical, but in my mind, the eval framework is basically where you code your IP. It's where your IP is coded from, a kind of like you capture the domain. Like the domain is captured in this layer in a way, right? And this is like very hard to replicate. This is a very kind of like industry specific. And we believe at Daisy that we'll probably be the first one in the world that will have for residential property management this layer of evals that captures the essence of what it means to be a really good property manager, right? Capture the nomenclature, capture the processes, right? Where you can be flexible, where you can be strict, and so on. So this is a bit philosophical. Now, practically, I would basically
By
think
the way,
of it.
that's not philosophical at all. I think that any person listening in to this podcast, that's how they should be thinking about creating advantage over time. So no, go ahead, but it's absolutely not philosophical.
Great. So yeah. And what I think is like, okay, let's think about. I'll try to describe how you kind of like layer this, create this compounding effect, right? So at first you have this agent and you just like look at it, right, doing stuff, and you kind of like judge whether it's good or not. But this is not enough, right? So you start to create those benchmarks. And you can think about those benchmarks as questions and answers, but because everything is random in a way, right? Because we're talking about LLMs, even if you run the same benchmark,
Hmm.
like one after the other, you could get slightly different results. Then you start generating, and there are many practices of using like a LLM as a judge to make sure that the answer is close enough to what you wanted to get as a response and so on. So there are a few practices that are now emerging. Uh, the most interesting part is in two aspects. First, how do you plug in your domain expert as it's a culture, and it's also an org chart, right? So you basically take people who were previously like owning the service and you now repurpose them, right? You're not customer facing anymore, you're helping building the infrastructure of AI agents, right? And how do you build internal interfaces for them to actually capture good examples, bad examples, right? I would even mention, if someone from the audience didn't see what Lemonade did, they actually built a fully fledged internal system that helps operators see how LLMs behave, replay answers, modify them, and plug that back into the logic or the prompt or the model. And we are following that steps, and this is critical. The last piece of the puzzle is how you close the loop by creating the next version, right? The next version, how does it look like? And the first stage, and this is where we are now, is to basically capture this, capture the information, and then basically create the next version, code the next version, right? And this can be changing of the prompt, but it can also be making your internal APIs, the tools, right, more expressive, right?
Mhm.
I was surprised how impactful it is to improve your accuracy by making your APIs more expressive and more
It's like giving
documented.
yeah, it's like giving better tools for any worksman, right? It's like
Amazing.
you and I think many times you try to solve everything with the same technology, and LLMs are it's Transformers is such a great technology, but it doesn't understand math, right? It doesn't understand like tooling is an important part. It's much more important than many things. And but you raise a couple of things that I think are worthwhile noodling on, or at least thinking. First, in the early days of Monday.com, when it was still called the Pulse, Roy did something super smart. He comped his salespeople. Uh, Similar to engineers. So they didn't have any sales comp base sale upside. And the reason was, he said, I'm learning how to sell the product. And so I want our incentives to be aligned. And what you're saying is pretty interesting. It's thinking that there is realignment of employees in the company, that their comp might have been before geared on their interactions outside or maybe sales, but now you want to align them. You want actually to have them provide better guidance to agents. So the comp model should also change. That's one thing that I think is like truly interesting. The other is investors nowadays are in kind of a strange combination of exuberance for AI, as well as thinking there are no moats and there's no venture anymore, and it's like deer in the headlight that you actually see in many situations. And what you describe of collecting information and closing the feedback loop is potentially a generator of moat, right? So the more
Correct.
buildings you serve, the more feedback your agents get. The more feedback they get, the more you can tune, ideally automatically, the agents, so they better serve. And if not, but even if not, as long as you're aware and focus at getting that feedback and improving on your agents, it makes you a better company. That's a
Correct.
very different situation than before. It's like, um, yeah, it's what's not clear, and I think would be really interesting with your experiences. At which point do you define that an agent is good enough performance wise in order to put it production ready? Like, at what point do agents become teammates?
Specifically with a service company like Daisy, I really like the focus on operational metrics. Operational metrics could be response time, resolve time, elements of throughput, customer satisfaction, right? Whether it's transactional or, and I think that once you have an agent that you feel that can move the needle, and it's actually very easy to understand because you plug it in a certain area of domain and you see you see two things. First, you start seeing the metrics improving, but you also see the team more reassured because property management is difficult. It's a hard business. And you see them kind of like, okay, I have help, right? It's like getting another person to your team that can help you. Literally, you see the same excitement of them adopting an agent that's new to the team and is like, oh, thank God that this agent Lily now can classify tickets for us, right? And they're so happy though. This is the point where you say, okay, it's production ready, right? Uh, yeah. So it's a mix
Interesting.
of kind of like, yeah,
Yeah, it's pretty subjective, and it's like operational
yeah.
metrics, but then like employee happiness about interaction with other team members who happens to be AI.
I have to put a point here because I think you also mentioned that it's slightly related to the comp story that you said before. Yotam, my co-founder, did an amazing job from, I think, the introduction of GPT 3.5. We started doing bi-monthly, like every 2 weeks, we had a session where we'd spent at least 10 minutes talking about AI in the entire company. The amount of effort that or investment that he basically took the company towards this AI era, that every person in the company is like waiting for that. There's zero resentment or skepticism, right? Because we invested a lot in the culture of like, okay, this is going to carry us forward.
I love
Uh,
that. That's one of the
Very early
highlights.
on. Yeah.
That's one of the highlights of our conversation, and actually I had a question that is related to that, but you might have answered this, which is how does a technical co-founder interact with his non-technical co-founder, especially in a world where the capabilities of AI change so fast? Like, how's the dynamic when your co-founder comes and tells you about this amazing idea that you say there's no freaking way this is going to work, or maybe actually inspires? Like, how does it change the interaction between the two co-founders?
Yeah. Uh, First, I have to say that Yotam is, while he's not a coder, he's like one of the best product people that I know. He's extremely technical and he knows a lot. But I think that as a CEO of a tech company, he sometimes dreams big. And yes, it's good that he dreams big. This is what steers the company forward. And yes, you are correct that sometimes I need to kind of like capture this dream, which is maybe very high up, and try to kind of like design how this meets us in the day to day. And actually, he was dreaming of agents in the workforce maybe 1 year before I saw it being discussed elsewhere. First, it was how to believe, but now it's reality. At Daisy, it's reality. We have agents as part of team members. So I'm basically just connecting the dots. It's my role, I think.
It's like science fiction. As a kid, that's my favorite line of books, and many of the science fiction books actually portrayed what we're going through today. So, like a non-technical co-founder is like a science fiction book, maybe. And it could be that the evals database that we talked about before, right? So having those dreams is on, and if you can, it has prior failure modes that some will be resolved by data, some by the next generation. So any dream, any idea, like what we need is to teach the non-technical people how to write that down in a way that works. What's the institutional memory if you have, like, how does it work over time? Of what's the like, how great was it to cede control to AI and, institutional memory of, like, a big failure mode, that happened in some adoption scenario?
Every person in the audience listening to this has their own set of problems that they're trying to solve. And I think that everyone knows where are the areas that you want to, you can experiment. You need to really always have this area where you can experiment with. An example could be certain types of customers that you feel safer to fail. right? Or certain kind of interactions, or maybe lines of business where there's no regulation involved, right? I wouldn't start there, right? Like, or there's no financial transactions involved. I don't want to start there. I want to start in areas that are safer. And once you have this area that is safe to experiment, and you also engage the team, the operational team, whatever, marketing, whoever that's working there with you, you say, hey guys, we're experimenting with stuff. We could fail. Some of those failures can be embarrassing. That's fine. Like we will work with that, and we'll do whatever it takes to learn fast and right and recover. I can give an example, right? We have an agent that responds extremely fast over email. Why? Because it's AI, but we are not in this line of in this area. We had customers basically saying, "This is too fast. Why is it so fast? This is like surprisingly fast." And we actually had to artificially add some kind of like wait time before the responses are being sent, because it created some kind of like what's happening there. And this is, again, it's a certain area of the business where the responses are generated by an agent, but the customer doesn't know that it's an agent, right?
Mhm.
So this was okay. It's fine. Okay, we fixed that. Let's move on, right? Because in we started with an area that is safer to experiment with, and this is my general advice.
Erez Dickman, you mentioned the Lemonade framework before. Erez Dickman, when I consulted towards this episode, actually mentioned something of a different way to risk manage is at risky situations, instead of the AI actually either taking the action or helping you take the action, but in an unstructured way, it should actually drive a UI, like the old school UI. So, hey, you want
Amazing.
to change your payment schedule? Listen, here's the UI. I will open it for you. I might pre-fill it for you, but still, you need to interact with it in a structured way.
Amazing. There's a lot of research today about interactions with AI. And one really interesting is kind of like everyone knows that chat, right? Chat is a great interface for AI, but like I see it evolving in many places. Even you can see in ChatGPT that sometimes it renders like a table or some sort of form, so on. There's this concept of generative UI, right? So basically, instead of like asking you a question of like whatever, what's the size of your apartment, right? Instead of, and you can type the answer, you can basically render a slider, right? Or whatever UI component that's easier for the customer, to the user to interact with. And this is a really, really interesting way to create interactions that are also providing this safety.
Yep.
And I think that there are actually even two modes here. I'll just like touch on that for a second. You can have a preset of components that you just like plug in the chat, right? And you can also think about generating custom, right? Kind of like vibe coding on the fly, whatever interface that the AI would do, like whatever, like maybe we'll try a map, but you don't, and then you need access to the design system and so on. Really interesting technologies happening there.
I love it. So I'll end with just two quick questions I usually ask every person. When do you think AGI is coming? What's your bet?
Uh, 2027,
2027. So an ASI immediately after?
probably.
China or the US?
The US.
Yeah, so far it's 2-1, and if I get the vote, then it's 2-2. Anyway,
I'm for yeah,
Team America.
yeah,
Hey,
Team America.
thank you so much. This was
Of course.
awesome. Really
Thank you very
appreciate
much.
that. And hey, talk soon.
Talk soon. Bye.
What Nir is building at Daisy is more than an automation tool. It's a new layer of trust between humans and machines. The companies that win in this era won't be the ones that collect the most data or have the biggest models. They'll be the ones that have the feedback loops, making their agents better. Because the real challenge isn't making agents act, it's helping them evolve. If you have any questions, comments, recommendations for future guests, feel free to email us at almosthuman@aleph.vc. If you enjoyed today's episode, rate us 5 stars, share it with a friend, I'm Edit Shochat, and this is Almost Human. We'll see you next time.